Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. So I had a question on Reddit asked that somebody wanted me to go into detail or to explain why you should or why you might want to play with this blueprint book, why you might want to use the system that I've made. And while I have explained it in some detail on the in a text post, I thought I should probably also make a video on it. And I figured out the best way to actually explain it is to simply say and consider why I made this blueprint in the first place, right? There's something I wanted to do, and there is a reason that I went to the effort to actually create systems like these. So it all started when I got pretty bored of playing main bus spaces, and I wanted to go and play a couple of Railtown maps, and I got started on it, but I got pretty bored pretty quickly of having to build individual outposts. Sadly, I don't have any of these games anymore, I think. Yeah, I lost them a while ago. But essentially, yeah, don't have them anymore. But essentially the problem was really that I had to go out to every outpost every time prepare a build a train, and I'd keep forgetting a material or two, and I'd keep having to come back and get that, and just pissed me off, simply said. So I decided that I would build some proper building train systems, because I didn't have anything, right? I just kept playing main bases until up to that point, and so I had no need of a builder train. If there were outposts, they were always only to get some more resources, more minerals, stuff like that. Metals, no reason to actually build a proper builder train for that kind of stuff. But this time I decided with a Railtown, and if you don't know, Railtown is basically a map where you don't focus on a main base. Instead, you have, if possible, every single item in the game produced in its own outpost. And the challenge comes mostly from handling your train traffic, right? Because that's obviously a lot of trains on the map, and you need to figure out how to make them move efficiently. And if you're going to build so many outposts, you're going to want to have a builder train. You're going to want to automate as much as you can. So I went with a couple different ways to do it. I tried trains where I would filter the train slots, but I didn't like all the clicking. I have some issues with repetitive strain injuries, so that was basically right out, right? Clicking 40 times per wagon. And further than that, I didn't even really like a clunky system like that. I didn't want to have 10 different trains just to serve me for building an outpost. I would much prefer to have one train that does everything. I found that much neater, and so I decided I would build a system that could load a train with the resources I want, and I needed to be able to at first I had the remote set up in such a way that I would basically have a couple rows of combinators like this, right? And they would be connected outwards like this. And up here I had, instead of the setup, I had like one here and two here, and then I would send a signal over the global network that would select, for example, I would send up A1. That would mean that the first loadout was to be the one chosen for the train. And if I wanted a different loadout, then I would send A2, and the next loadout would be chosen instead. And at some point I decided, well, if I'm already going to do some remote stuff, why not just allow me to completely set the loadout itself actually at a distance? And in the same move, I decided, because I was having issues with trains failing to load properly, because all the items would end up in one wagon, for example, and the others would be almost free, I decided that I would want to load my train per wagon. And that's when I really got started with the complicated combinator stuff, because as I've already explained in some of my other videos, or you will hear soon in my other videos, stations can only track what's in the entire train. They cannot track what's in a train per wagon. So if you want to know what's in one wagon, you're going to have to do some work to make that happen. And I got started on some different designs. They were pretty ineffective at the time. Some of them had a lot of weaknesses that can lock up. I could lock up the system, could freeze the system, and I had some issues figuring out which signal to isolate for these unloading inserters, right? So let's go up here, it's a little bit easier to see. The unloading side is on the left here. This is the loading side. And loading is fairly easy. You simply tell your bots what to deliver, right? It sets up some filters on here with set requests. They get loaded into the chain, and on the other side, you have to tell these inserters what to unload and what amount of it to unload. And then you also have to keep track of what they're unloading, right? And compare that with what you've loaded over here. But the problem, of course, is that you cannot use each as the stack control signal. You have to provide from these signals that you're delivering, you somehow have to figure out which of the signals the inserter is going to pick. Because, all right, let's explain this. So let's say I want 5 different items, right? I've loaded 5 different items into the train, and all 5 items have a couple items too many of them in a train. So since I know what I've loaded into the train, that's no problem. I'm simply going to take the items that I have too many of and deliver them over here to each inserter, divide it by 6, for example, and get the remainder, give that to one inserter. That way I can ensure that the inserters will pick up only the items that they're supposed to pick up. And if I have too few of one item, well, there's going to be one insert that's picking it up. And maybe I want to set this to override stack size 1. That way I can ensure that only the right amount of items gets removed. But these are stack filter inserters. They can move up to 12 items at once. So if I actually override the stack size, not with a control signal, but with the actual value of 1, right? If I didn't have, let's leave that in here, set stack size. If I did something like this, I would be wasting the capacity of these stack size, these stack inserters. So the next step you take after that is to figure out which of the 5 items the inserter is going to move, and use the number of that from your tracker of what has been put in too much, and use that number as the control signal. So that means you need to figure out which of the 5 you're going to feed the inserter, and the way I solved that was with a max finder. And what that does is it takes all the signals, all the items that have been overloaded, takes the highest value out of those and feeds that to the inserters, and they choose which of the items with that same value gets removed. Because I don't care which they remove, I just care that they remove the item or items with the highest value first. As you can see, it's getting pretty involved at that point, right? And then there is still situations where you might get stuck. For example, what happens if these inserters, if the wagon is full, so these inserters can't drop the items, right? But the items they're holding combined have a higher value than any item that these inserters could remove from the wagon. You get stuck because now you can't load the item that these inserters want to remove. Therefore, they're not removing the item so that these the items that they could remove, so that these items then can drop in the rest of the items. You always get stuck in some way, and you could fix that by, instead of tracking what the inserters are holding, you can track what they're dropping with a falling edge inserter, and it keeps going on and on and on. And then I've added more stuff like these guys over here. I can use these guys to check what's in my memory of what I want to load, if that will even fit the train, or how full the train is going to be. Right? And then you also want to know, is this wagon loaded properly, or is it missing items? Does it have too many items that need to be unloaded first? And all of that really adds up, and you're going to end up with a pretty big system. It took me, because before I started this whole journey, I basically had nearly no experience at combinators. I'd done some simple managing stuff to keep my power generators fueled and free of contamination. Let's see, where do I have that? Right, I'd use something like this. The fuel would come in here, right, and it would be sorted out bit by bit, and then it would be led over here into the like this way is the generators, the boilers and stuff, and this would basically keep track of what I have in here, so that it could sound me an alarm when the incoming fuel was getting too sparse, right? And these chests that were serving as that were building up the buffer, as long as I had enough items coming in, the generators, the boilers didn't use it all up, slowly this buffer would fill up, right? So when eventually the fuel would run out because maybe the coal miners ran out of coal, or the chemical, the refineries couldn't keep up anymore, or something like that. Eventually I wouldn't get enough fuel anymore, and the buffers over here would start emptying, and that would send me an alarm how much I would have left. Right, it sent me 2 different alarms. So I'd know, okay, I'm starting to lose fuel, I need to do something about it soon. And then another alarm, okay, I really need to get started now. And that was basically my very first thing. Very simple circuit, really. But this is in a different class entirely. What you saw back there, I basically multiplied itself by the items in the game divided by 5, you could say, right? And that's just this little part here. That's just for these lamps. Everything else after that, I had to learn how to do. And I poured a lot of effort into it to make sure that it was as resistant to user errors as possible, right? So it wouldn't get itself stuck. There's only one single case where it can still get stuck, and that is very, very rare. And that happens in such a way that if there's stuff in the wagon and it's full, and all 6 inserters at the same time want to move in the last or need to move in one more item or fill the last partial stack, but all 6 inserters at the same time happen to pick up items that are not that last item that are missing, but there's nothing that needs to be removed either. Let's just demonstrate that, how that looks real quick, because that's a bit stupid to explain. Train gets loaded. Let's see what happens there. Maybe that's actually the bug. Normal speed, so I can move. Alright, no, this is just a game bug. So what's happened here is, and this is just in the current version of Factorio, I hope they fix it soon, where sometimes inserters want to drop off their item, like you can see over here on the right side, waiting for space in destination. There is definitely space in the destination, it's just for some reason the inserter isn't noticing. I'm gonna do that, and all of a sudden, there we go. Woke up the inserters. I did nothing but block the space and then unlock it again, and the inserters realized it was there. Right, so the train is finished loading, and that single issue where the station can still get locked up is basically, if you imagine, everything that has to be loaded has been loaded except for one stack that is not fully finished, right? But you still have some items over here that don't belong anymore, right? That should get moved through. Plus one item, one partial stack that still needs to be moved into the train to fill up. Let's say I have only, right, so I want 5 more roboports, right? But there are still some other items in here, right? This has to go into the train, but it can't because the item wants to move a different item in. But these guys don't need to remove anything because nothing I have in here is too much, right? This is the only situation that can happen, and all 6 inserters at the same time have to pick up the wrong item for that to happen. But this situation is very, very rare. It has happened naturally exactly once in, I don't know how many thousand times I've had the system run. It has happened once, so it can happen, but it's really, really rare. really doesn't happen much. All right, let's have you go out here again. If I need to blueprint this again, I don't want to train in the station, but I do want to here. Right. So I've created a system that is very stable, very reliable, that you can tell at a distance what you want to load and into which wagon you want to load it, and what amount of it you want to load, right? And you can even do so while the train is in the station, and the circuits will adjust to that and unload what you suddenly don't want anymore, right? So the train doesn't get stuck or anything. I've even devised a system that allows you to tell it how many times you want trains to leave the system, right? So if you say you want this loadout 5 times, you can do that either by putting that in here, or just with the remote you can tell it. And I've even managed to make it work so that you have this depot multiple times, and you want to say, okay, these guys load wagons 1 through 4, right? And you have a second depot that allows you to load wagon, let's say, in a different train. Yeah, this is the second train, and you call the 4 wagons it has wagons 101 through 104, right? You can just go to the remote, and you don't even have to change this. So this is wagon 1, wagon 2, wagon 3, and you find these same signals over here, right? Gray 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And you have this depot again somewhere else, and you've gone there and you've said, okay, this is no longer 4, this is now 104, right? Then you can go up here, and instead of having to manually change this to 104, you can just go and use this to add 100 to the address, right? It's an address elevator is what I call it. So you turn this on. If you're wondering how I did that just now, that's a mod. It's called push button, and it gives you a hotkey that you can use to turn constant combinators on and off without having to enter them. Right? It's basically the same thing as this. And suddenly every address I send is not 4 anymore, but 104 or 103 and so on, right? So I've made sure that you have a lot of utility here. Let's turn that to null, because this is my original. For any, if I make any changes, I do them in here and then add it to a blueprint and update the blueprint. And this is basically just for your builder train. This is just so that you can get the materials that you need to make your outpost. And then I've copied the system and changed it slightly to create the other half, which is the maintenance. And what happens here is that as you build your outposts, right, you need to deliver materials to them. Let's say you need to deliver repair packs, you need to deliver more bots, maybe you need ammunition for defenses or artillery shells, stuff like that. And that's what this system is for. And what basically happens is that your outpost sends its own train. Like every outpost has its own train, and it sends it to the depot, right? Comes in here, and the depot communicates back to the global network which train it is, and the outpost knows that that's the train that belongs to it, and can then use that information to trigger a pulse that sends the loadout of this outpost back to the train, so it'll get loaded with what you want that specific outpost to have, right? So not only do you have your own builder train with a lot of functions that you usually don't see, and especially not in vanilla stations. By the way, this is for vanilla, so you can play this in the vanilla game without any mods. You can also use mods though. Like it's not, it doesn't hate mods. There are some things that you wanna know about. For example, I have these data banks here, right? They contain every item in the game, sorted by stack size. So over here I have every item in the game that has a stack size of 10 in these combinators, and over here stack size of, is it 1? Yep. Or stack size of 200, right? And they're sorted together. So if you use mods, you'll have to use a script I prepared to get more of these combinators that can actually just show you, I think. So basically the way it works, you build one constant combinator and you get the script. Let me get the script real quick. Where would I have it? I think I still have it in VS Code active. Right. You get the script. You mouse over the combinator. And I've published the script on Reddit, so it's definitely available to you too. Even if you don't need it for this blueprint book, you can use it. You copy that into the chat and you just hit enter and you get these lines of combinators over here. Right, and now it has all the items plus items introduced by mods. Right, these have been introduced by mods, sorted by their stack size. So you can see over here, the only item that I currently have that has a stack size of 2000 is in its own combinator. And every other items with stack size 2, these two combinators have items with the stack size 200 in them together, right? This is probably 50, 100, 200. And over here you have 1, 5, or this is 5, yeah, this is 5, and this is 10, 20, is this still, no, that's already 50, 20, and 50, right? And I could use this information now if I wanted to make sure that my trains could also deal with these guys. I would simply take this and I would replace the data bank I have over here, right? I would take the combinators and replace them, making sure that they're stuck to the right arithmetic combinator, and I could just be able to go. I'd make new blueprints with that and I'd be ready to go. And the script is called, I have it on Reddit, it's called, I'll add the link in the description actually, simple as that. Scripts to spawn constant combinators with signals sorted by all the item stack sizes with a value of 1. Works with items added by mods, although if you don't want it with a value of 1, as I do need it here for my itemization here, you can also change a line in the script, which I've also detailed in the Reddit post, that allows you to add items each with individual, either with the stack size or maybe with unique IDs. Also, that already exists. You don't need unique IDs. That already exists. All right. So went off on a tangent there, but I've made sure that these stations could deal with all the items in the game without me ever having to bother with it, right? And that includes the resource stations too. So what's special about the resource stations? I've gone over the maintenance. The outpost here has a couple extra functions. I can turn the stations on and off, and I can do so remotely too by sending the correct signal, the A signal with the correct value over the global network, right? And the outpost itself can be turned on locally as well as I can tell the train whether to go or not. I can tell the inserters if they're allowed to unload the train or load or do nothing at all. And once I'm done, I can get rid of all the items and bring them back to the main base or to the depot using a trash cycle. And once the trash cycle is done, it'll turn the station off. So lots of automation here, lots of stuff I don't have to care about anymore. It'll even tell me how full the station is. Right now there's lots of free space. As these lamps turn off, there's less and less space, and it'll tell me when there's no more, including with an alarm, it'll tell me when there's absolutely no more space to be had in these storage containers. There's lots of options I have here. I can, for example, I can use the train, right? It comes from the depot with the items in it, and it is basically my chest over here, and I can choose to only unload a specific number of items into the station by saying this is the fraction of items that I've defined here that I want the station to unload from the train, right? I want it to unload all these things. I want the train to deliver these things, and I want the station to unload these things from the train. And I can use this guy to tell the station how much of it. So in this case, 1/3 of the items here to unload from the train. I could tell it to unload everything I have to find, right? Now it unloads a whole of what I have to find here. There's a lot of function I've added, a lot of features I've added to these systems that you just don't get with vanilla stations, right? These are filter inserters, so these are told what to unload from the train, so they don't unload just everything or anything. You can specifically tell the station what you want here. And I've done something similar with the or similar things with the resource stations. So in vanilla, you basically have to say, okay, I have a train here and it's supposed to go to maybe iron plate station northeast, number 1. And once you've been there, you take the items from there and you bring it back to iron plates unload main base, right? That's pretty typical. That's what you'll, once you've figured out trains a little bit and the signaling and you start automating trains, that's probably what you'll go with. But what if you could have any train that has a that you want to use to unload iron plates, right? The station is now called load, but that would be called iron plates load. And then you have the unload station in your near your smelters or near your main base, and you call that iron plates unload. And every train can go to any station that's called iron plates load and deliver from there to any station that's called iron plate unload. And you might have multiple of these, right? You might have, let's say, 5 different outposts that mine iron ore and smelt it into iron plates. And you tell your trains to go to any outpost called iron plates load. And then they should go to any station called iron plates unload, right? How do the trains choose which of these stations to go to? Well, they go to the closest one, right? So the next step you might take is, okay, if my trains are always going to the same station because that's closer and they're not going to the other stations at all, there are times when I need to turn the station off, so they start going to the other stations as well. The problem now is, of course, when the station is off, it can't serve trains. And all your trains, while they are now going to a different station, they're still going to the same different station. So you basically get this huge wave of trains jogging or clogging every station they come across. And so I've used one of the systems I've used is that the stations can turn themselves off when they don't have enough trains to serve anymore, when they're not worth coming to anymore. But while they're on, I've also used another system to make sure that my trains split up properly, and that's the path penalty system. So trains, they choose the closest station, but there are ways that you can tell the trains that a station is actually further away than it really looks, that a station looks further away than it really is. So they don't want to go there, right? A train could be right here, and if all these lamps are red, the station that's below here actually looks closer than this station, even though clearly a train would be closer to this station than to another one down here, right? And that's done by turning these circuit signals red. And closed red signals, if they've been turned red by closed condition, they pretend that the segment that they are attached to is 1000 tiles longer than it really is, right? And that's how you tell a train which stations are close and which stations are far away. And I use the items in a station to calculate how many trains it could serve. And I've got provided that here. This is how many wagons I have in a train and how many slots are in the train. And then I use the data bank from earlier to figure out, okay, so I have this many items or I have this item in the chests and I have this many off, that's this and this many stacks. And these many stacks could fit in wagons of this size, and each train has this many wagons. That makes I can serve this and this many trains. And that information is what I use. So you can see over here how many trains it can serve, and that information is what I use to decide how many of these signals need to be red and how many need to be green. right? So then I have two different stations, and they have maybe one can serve 10 trains and the other can't serve 10 trains. So most of the trains will first head to this one, and eventually it'll go down to where it can serve the same number as this station. So they start exchanging signals, and the trains will start spreading between these two stations very evenly, right? And that's already pretty advanced. That's already pretty good. If you're at that point, well, you might as well add an alarm. So what happens, for example, many of you will have probably experienced the pain of having to clean up after a mistake of the wrong train in the wrong station. So the first time that happened to me, I'd set up my stations and I created the trains, and then I renamed one station, and suddenly a whole lot of copper trains went into an iron station, right? Well, damn, I had to spend quite a bit of time to clean that up and keep running for my inventory. All right, so the next step is to add an alarm that compares what's in the train to what's in the buffer chest. And if that's not the same, it disallows the station to load or unload the train. And it also stops the train from leaving, right? And in that way, you can make it even smarter. You can make the station even more useful. But what if you could go even further? Because with this system, you still have the issue of if one station, if you have a bunch of stations, let's say you need a lot of iron plates in one outpost. So you have more than one station of these, right? You've taken care of the fact that the trains spread between the stations, right? They take advantage of there being two stations. They don't just try to go to the closest anymore, right? You've made sure that they spread between the stations. Okay. The issue is still that the train might be stuck here, and it can't go to the station because there's a train in here, and it'll wait here, and it'll take 5 seconds at least for the station to recalculate that there's another station that's open. And you maybe have this multiple times, and you suddenly end up with one station being empty for 30 seconds or for a minute even, when in fact you could just almost fill it immediately when the last train left. So how do you force a train to recalculate the viable stations it could go to immediately? Well, what about if you turn the station it could go to off, right? Yeah, but I don't want to turn the station off. I still want trains to come here and get loaded. So what if I added a station before the station, right? That's that over here. Now this station turns itself off every time there can't fit any more trains in here, right? So I've dealt with the issue of empty station in two ways. One, I've added a system where a train is forced to recalculate its viable stations immediately and therefore head off immediately to another station instead of waiting 5 seconds or more. And I've also made sure that there's enough space in here for 2 more trains, right? So the train comes in here, gets loaded, the next train also comes in here, and the next train goes in here, and they wait until the station is free. And as soon as the station is free, the next train comes immediately in. And this station, this dummy station, this waypoint station, will turn itself off as soon as there are 3 trains in here. So any train that would want to go in here, even though there's no more space, is forced to immediately go in here and instead fill this station up, right? And there fit three more trains in here, and on and on. So I have trains spread up properly, and I have them not waste any time in the stations, right? And there's actually the next problem. What if the station that they want to go after this doesn't need any more items, right? You end up with trains waiting in here and waiting until, let's say this is a loading station, so they need to go to an unload station next, but there are no unload stations that need items. Doesn't matter too much. I mean, you have a train full, and as soon as the station needs items again, the train can just leave and go there, right? But I didn't like that. I thought it was much more elegant if I just let as many trains as possible fill up. So what I've done, the next step was basically on the outbound stacker, I added these waypoint stations, right? And they're almost always off. They only turn on if all unload stations of the resource are turned off, right? So in that case, all the trains from the loading stations come in here, right? And they park here. Instead of blocking the station for more trains, the trains can actually leave the station and can park in this stacker, right? That's what it's for. And they leave the station free to feed more trains. So I end up with a lot of trains that are full of items, just waiting for an unload station to want items, right? And if you look at the unload station, what happens here is I have this latch system that turns the station on and off. So a station is on and can serve trains until the number of trains that the station can actually serve is below 3, right? Because it's not really worth coming here anymore for trains if they're just gonna pass right on by, right? If the number of trains it can serve is too low, it's not worth for the stations to come here anymore if there's another station instead. And the station will stay off until it can serve at least 10 trains. Well, guess what? As soon as it turns on, I have got 10 trains just waiting. So they all hurry here and they all fill up the stations. They're just re-enabled. And I have a bunch of items available again. Right, and that's what I've ensured with the system of having the stacker. So there's a lot of smart ways that I've taken advantage of vanilla systems. All of this doesn't take any mods. You can do this with vanilla. You just have to know how. You have to be able to use combinators, and you have to understand how trains calculate the path, which station they want to go to, how to make them not waste time recalculating which station to go to, and how to ensure that each station is constantly busy with a train, right? And I think that about covers it. I've got a very useful train traffic system here, for example. One more trick that I've also taken advantage of, right? If you've played with trains with more than one track in each direction, and the trains can switch tracks, you've probably discovered that a lot of the time trains switch tracks when they shouldn't, right? Or they don't switch track when they should. So one of the ways you can fix that is to read backwards. So this is the outbound stacker, right? Trains come this way. Right? Trains come from the bottom, they drive out this way. Right? And they keep driving because this is green, they just keep going. But you can actually use signals on the other side to read backwards, right? So if I move this train back to beyond the signal, right? No train is ever going to come down this way because the track does not actually allow it. The tracks up here are all single file in this direction, right? No train can come this way, so there's no danger of a train actually entering this intersection in the wrong direction. So the only purpose this serves is to check whether or not there's a train here, right? This signal can only read whether there's a train here, but this signal reads whether there's a train here. And because this is a chain signal, it goes back and does the same all the way to this signal. And as soon as there's a train here, I can read that off of this signal, right, with the red and yellow, and turn this one red. So any train, and that's over here, cannot continue straight because the signal is red. So it'll instead dodge. Oh, okay, spawned that a little bit too far forward. So it'll instead dodge over here. And this train can... one more try. And this train instead can go straight here. Because this train is no longer on this track. It's made space, it's dodged this train, right? It's dodged on the upper lane. So the train that came from the stacker can keep accelerating at full speed, and the traffic is moving a lot quicker this way. And this, you can use this kind of trick everywhere, and I've definitely taken advantage of it. All these little tricks that I've added in this system, and I figure there's a good reason that you might want to use the system over any old system, right? It should be a lot of fun having your trains do exactly what you want them to do. All right, thank you for watching, guys. It's been fun making the system, and I hope that you enjoy using it. And please leave a comment if you like what you're seeing, or if you would like to see more, even better stuff, because I'm not done with this yet, right? There's stuff I'll add in the future, and the previous video that you just came from contains the changelog, so every now and then, if you feel like playing Factorio again and you are still busy with this system, you could check the changelog if there have been any updates. Thank you for watching.